Okay, so a little bit more about reliability. Let's talk about internal consistency of reliability. Um, this type of reliability is the assessment of reliability using responses at only one point in time. Because all items measure the same variable, they should yield similar or consistent results. So one indicator of internal consistent reliability, or internal consistency, is the split half reliability. This is the correlation of the total score on one half of a test and the total score on the other half of a test. The two halves are created randomly, dividing the items in two parts. So perhaps the most commonly used indicator of reliability based on internal consistency is called Cronbach's alpha. Some people say Cronbach's, I think it's Cronbach's. This provides us with an average of all possible split half reliability coefficients. So it is possible to examine the correlation of each item score with the total score based on all of those items. Such item total correlations are very informative because they provide information about each individual item. So then we have inter-rater reliability. Inter-rater reliability, these things are a mouthful, let me tell you. Inter-rater reliability is the extent to which raters agree in their observations. So two raters will be rating something. Maybe it's a observation or a test or something natural, whatever. But it's the extent, maybe they're scoring something the same. I know we do this in risk assessment. We both will score the same person using the same measure, and then we'll check to see if we got the same score within 1 point on either side. And so that's inter-rater reliability. And that's really important because you want to make sure that you're coming up with the same kind of scoring, particularly when we're thinking about things like risk assessment. Reliability and accuracy of measures. So reliability is really a very important thing or concept when researchers are developing these measures of behavior. Reliability isn't the only characteristic of a measure, however, or the only thing that researchers worry about. Reliability tells us a lot about measurement error, but it doesn't tell us whether we have a good measure of that variable of interest. And this is where validity comes in. So let's talk about validity. Construct validity of measures refers to the adequacy of the operational definition of variables. To what extent does the operational definition of the variable actually reflect the true theoretical meaning of that variable? So if I'm measuring depression and I'm using the Beck Depression Inventory, we know that that has good validity. But let's say we didn't know that. To what extent do the items on that measure really reflect the true theoretical meaning of depression? That's construct validity. Same thing with like happiness. If we're trying to measure the concept of happiness, to what extent does my measure of happiness really measure this definition or this theoretical concept of what does it mean to be happy? There's indicators of construct validity, and they are face validity, content validity, and predictive validity, concurrent validity, and convergent validity, and then discriminant validity. So you'll read about those in your book. I'll give you just a brief kind of definition. Face validity is when the measure appears on the face to accurately measure that intended variable. So it looks like what it's measuring. So it's pretty obvious to people when they're taking it. Content validity is based on comparing the content of the measure with the universe of content that defines the construct. Predictive validity is research that uses a measure to predict some form of future behavior using predictive validity. Then we have concurrent validity, and concurrent validity is demonstrated by research that examines the relationship between the measure and a criterion behavior at the same time or concurrently. Then we have convergent validity, and this is the extent to which scores on a measure in question are related to scores on other measures of that same construct or similar constructs. So if we have two measures of depression, they would, if they both came up with the same kind of scoring scheme on the same types of items, then they would be said to have convergent validity. Then we have discriminant validity, and that's the final one. This is when a measure is not related to variables with which it should not be related. So it discriminates against those variables. So if we have an item on our Beck depression inventory that's related to happiness, it should not measure that. And so it does discriminate between happiness and depression. So those are just some other concepts related to the types of reliability that we think about when we're talking about measurement, and this week's chapter having to do with measurement concepts. So be sure to go through your chapter really thoroughly. It goes through these concepts in even more detail, and then it's going to talk also about measurement scales. And so you'll want to be familiar with the types of scales that we use, like nominal scales and ordinal scales and all of that as well. Because when you're looking at your data and when you're thinking about how you're going to measure your variables, you'll want to determine what type of variables and what kind of scales you're using in order to choose the right statistical analysis. Okay, I hope you enjoy week 5, and I will be in touch.